Welcome to Sports Vision Pros and our Eye on Nutrition. So in this series, what we're going to do is we're going to take it right from the building blocks of our understanding of general nutrition, and we're going to walk it all the way up to the level of elite science and what we're doing on the cutting edge type stuff. We're fortunate today to have Dr. Fraser Horn, who's with us from Pacific University, as well as Dr. Jim Stringham, who is the Chief Science Officer for one of the major pharmaceutical or nutraceutical companies on the market. And so what we're going to do is we're going to tap his knowledge a little bit, and we're going to go from a physician side with myself and Dr. Horn, and we're going to talk about kind of where you should know nutrition has been, where we get the key concepts in our understanding of nutrition, which is not that easy to understand, and it's not that clear, to be honest with you. And then we're going to kind of go from there. So Fraser, if you could just say a couple words about, your background and some of the stuff that you guys do there at Pacific.
Yeah, no, thank you, Derek. Here at Pacific, obviously, we train individuals to become optometrists, and we also have a Master's of Science and a PhD. So Master of Science in Vision Science and PhD in Vision Science, where we do have our students who are looking into the impact of nutritional supplements and other ways that we affect performance day in and day out, but then also for athletes. So it's a wonderful group that we have here, and we're very fortunate to be able to work with Dr. Stringham on different projects. And so we're very fortunate. So thank you, Jim, for all your help there. And I think the goal, just like what you said, Derek, for this is really to educate people and give them the opportunity to understand a lot of the evidence-based knowledge that's out there to help them making their decisions. We know that our community within Sports Vision Pros isn't just physicians, it's also athletes, parents, coaches, athletic trainers, and just anybody who's interested in vision and performance. And so, just nutritional supplements is such a huge part of that for various reasons and legitimate reasons. And so we want to make sure we have a conversation that we can give you that education. So, Dr. Stringham, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Fraser. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Jim Stringham. I'm a PhD researcher, and I have my PhDs in vision science and neuroscience, and so I spent the vast majority of my career in academia, about 20 or 25 years now, researching the effects, the benefits of specific nutrients, carotenoids and omega-3s. Many of these you've heard of, on visual and cognitive performance, and characterizing these effects over, like I say, about the past 25 years, and it's been very exciting, and I've been able to work with patient populations, military personnel, athletes, and there's benefits across the board.
Now that's a very brief introduction. Dr. Stringham has actually been to several, local, poorly understood and relatively unknown schools like Harvard, Georgia, and Duke. So I don't want to give him too much credit before we get going here. Certainly not the level of Pacific University or the University of Texas here. So, what we're going to do is let's start off by some basic general concepts. Now, this is one of the things that really, when I first got into science and research and started doing a lot of, I would say, trying to get bench research to practical application, one of the things that we started doing, and I think Harvard was kind of one of the ones that we took a lot of data from, was this concept of retrospective food-based studies, which I think is where all of nutrition truly starts. And as much as we think of all this great stuff we're doing prospective looking, if we look back at the wealth of a lot of the pivotal studies, don't you agree, Jim, that a lot of this stuff was really just looking at what people were eating and why certain populations did better with certain things?
Yeah, absolutely, Derek. That's so true. In fact, in some of the micronutrient research that I've been involved in, the sort of cornerstone study was out of Harvard, and it was an epidemiological study, which is a large word for basically saying, tell me about what you've eaten, what you've done, exercise-wise, whatever, throughout your life, and then let's look at how you are now. Are you healthy? Do you have disease? Etc. And so this study was out of Johanna Seddon's lab, published in 1994, and again, retrospective, like you say, looking back. And so these were, older individuals. Do you have macular degeneration? Have you got, health problems? What did you do for your entire life that led you to this, situation that you're in currently? And the fascinating finding there was that, those who were in the upper quintile, so if you divide diet quality into 5 levels, the top one they had a 43% reduced risk for developing macular degeneration. And you think about, and they further, dug deep into what the folks were eating, and it turned out it was really accounted largely for by spinach and collard greens, a lot of, and kale and dark leafy greens, those kinds of, foods. And so, to think that, you can reduce, the incidence of, really the leading cause of visual disability in people over 60 in the United States and Western society as a whole, you can cut that nearly in half via diet over the long term. If you've consistently eaten these foods, I mean, that's a really huge finding, and it's really, when you think about the world of drugs, it outperforms any drug on the market that they have now. I mean, by a long shot. So this study was replicated again by another epidemiological study. 2011, Julie Mars out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, same thing, 46% reduced risk for macular degeneration. And so these relatively early studies indicated that consistent ingestion of these healthy nutrients, really kind of specific to leafy green vegetables and colored fruits and vegetables, really have a dramatic impact on health. Further, we conducted, based a lot on these early studies, we conducted prospective studies. And hey, what happens if you take these nutrients and to your performance, your visual performance, cognitive performance at the time, when you're 25, when you're 30, not waiting until you're older to see if you develop disease. And what we found was really cool. I mean, we found performance enhancement, significant performance enhancement for these individuals. And the takeaway really is, nutrition impacts the health of tissues like the retina in the back of the eye, brain tissue. It improves the health, and therefore, mediates this really dramatically, improved performance. And so that basically started with retrospective studies.
Now, one of the things that is really interesting here, and we're going to do our best to not go off on tangents, is clearly there is commonalities. If you're going to help one tissue, you're probably going to help other tissues in the body. And I think one of the things that both of you could speak very well to is cognitive issues, perhaps concussion, rehabilitation, all that kind of stuff. We're going to try to leave that kind of into a separate segment as we go on. And certainly as we talk about certain eye benefits, we are going to touch on the general health benefits as well. I just don't want everyone out there thinking that, we have blinders on to the rest of this stuff. We're certainly going to bring it up as it comes along. Now, Fraser, in school, whether it's medical school, optometry school, we spend a lot of time introducing ourselves to minerals and vitamins by the deficiencies and the diseases that result from that. And that's really how we're taught about how vitamins work. And I don't think I can't remember ever in my, medical or optometric training kind of going through and talking about, well, what happens, how do you enhance these biological mechanisms? It's more of what happens. Let's say you're an alcoholic and you can't absorb a certain amount of vitamin, or you're overly obese and you have this vitamin, or you're at sea for years and you get scurvy. So these are the things I think that traditional medicine maybe has, somewhat a global, really good understanding of what a deficiency means, but perhaps not a great understanding of what commonplace or even abundance means. Would you agree, Fraser?
Yeah, no, I think it's, we're all trained in, hey, there's this area, and it starts with things like scurvy, like you brought up, right? So this is helped with taking lime and citrus, and actually it's more lemon. Lime, the vitamin C is actually much lower than it is in lemon, but even though people love it in their gin and tonics, it's not going to help them with their scurvy. But I think, and then we look at various areas of, you're right, alcoholism and all that. And that's all a little bit about deficiencies, but it's really treated as, hey, it's there. Let's focus on the other stuff, right? The only main exception maybe when we look at ARED study looking at macular degeneration, where we start talking about antioxidants and other opportunities where they're looking at a good diet, nutrition, all of that. But I don't think we go into it as much as we could, especially as we look at, we discuss generics when it comes to pharmaceuticals and the differences between brand name and generic. But we don't talk about nutritional supplements or other things. And I think it sometimes is maybe glossed over more than what it should be, that not all of them are the same, just like not all diets are the same, not all produce is the same from where we get it from or that. So I think we, as we look at the holistic style of approach when it comes to helping our patients and our athletes, it's really more, we need to know more. We need to know more details, and we need to be able to focus on that personalized health and personalized care of each individual. And so saying, hey, just go eat more kale, which sometimes does not go over well when you bring that up, but dark green leafy vegetables and more fruits and vegetables, people go, okay, I'll go get a berry milkshake, at the local fast food place or something like that counts, right? And I think we need to be a lot better at really giving more defined, almost prescribed recommendations.
Now, to bring you back, and Jim, I'm going to bring you in on this. I got to bring this back to a conceptual idea, is that vitamins, minerals, supplements, these are all speaking to things that your body requires for cellular function, for proper function, but you do not have the ability to make yourself specifically. Now, there's several aspects where things get modified in your body and things of that nature, and we'll talk about that down the road a little bit. But really what we're talking about when we're talking about a vitamin, a mineral, a supplement, anything like that, it's basically these building blocks that are required to perform a certain biological task that you just don't have the ability to get yourself. Now, it's interesting we talked about retrospective studies, because the thing I love about retrospective studies is that they're not solid prospective data, placebo-blinded stuff, but we can power them with such high numbers. And this is what you guys did in your guys' study, and this is what we saw from the Harvard study and stuff. You can get such robust numbers that we can never do in a prospective randomized trial. You take the good and the bad, and we can filter out kind of what works. These are the Mediterranean diet studies. These are the omega studies. These are all these studies that we see, the carotenoid studies. We're pretty darn sure because we've been able to power them with such high numbers of people. One of the downsides is the prospective studies in controlling what people eat and what they do. And if we're looking over years, it's very, very difficult to control exactly what people eat, exactly how they live their lives, unless you put them in a lab setting. And the government really doesn't allow us to do this anymore, years on end. Unfortunately, we're not even allowed to test drugs on pregnant women anymore, which we used to a long time ago. So, when it comes down to the concept of nutrition, speak a little bit to Jim to this, when it comes to ingestion of food, all right, we've had hundreds of thousands to millions of years to refine this process and make sure that we are absorbing the nutrients the way we need to, the vitamins, the minerals. And there's also a shunting mechanism where if you get too much, we have to make sure that that's not going to hurt us. Now, in some ways, the food will self-regulate that because there's only so much you can get from the food, number one, which again, the supplement industry circumvents. And then the second thing is, there's natural biological ways that your body will internalize food, and you have to play in those. You basically have to play with those rules. You can't get outside the rules because otherwise nothing's going to happen. You won't get anything, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot here. If you look back in human history, we just generally speaking, human physiology was designed on ingesting a lot of plant material. There was some meat, a lot of precursors to omega-3s. I mean, also omega-3s from fish. Carotenoids from the colored fruits and vegetables, and so these were food types that we sort of had to eat in the past. Now we've diverged a lot from that in the modern day, and so we're not eating nearly as much as we should. However, on the vitamin front, we're getting plenty of vitamins, generally speaking. I mean, in sort of wealthy countries like the United States here, we've got fortification of breakfast cereal and everything else with vitamins, and so vitamins by definition, if you have a deficiency, that leads to disease. Like you mentioned, you're not able to form these cellular functions and enzymatic reactions that help serve important biological function. So but nevertheless, we're not getting a lot of key nutrients, micronutrients, maybe some you've heard of like lutein or zeaxanthin. We're just not getting those, and so we're deficient in those areas. And that has an impact. It may not lead directly, immediately to a disease, but long term, it may lead to disease. For instance, macular degeneration, Alzheimer's, dementia, that kind of stuff. But in the immediate sense, it limits performance in a huge way. And so getting to the point of the body regulating and it puts these nutrients for important ones that it sees fit to store, lipid soluble nutrients. They go into body fat. They go into areas, specifically maybe the retina and the eye, the brain, the skin. There are vast stores for these nutrients. And generally speaking, for some of the nutrients I study, these special carotenoids, they get deposited in multiple tissues. And the worst thing really that can happen to you is your skin may turn slightly yellow or orange. That's the worst possible thing. And the body then again also has ways to excrete them. So you're not going to harm yourself by eating too much healthy food, generally speaking. So the regulation is there partly on the food side of things. It's sort of locked into this fiber. It's hard to get a ton of the nutrients out. But even if you do constantly eat spinach or whatever you happen to be doing, you might have other issues than, skin coloration problems. But nevertheless, the body has regulatory mechanisms to help, diffuse some of any potential issues.
Now, this is something we're going to touch on in a totally different segment, and this is where we get to a much higher level, and this is where it's a healthy debate among especially researchers and physicians. Is there such thing as too much of a good thing? Can you oversaturate the system with certain nutrients? And certainly there is toxicity levels with some of these nutrients. You don't really see that with food because of the way that your body can minimally absorb and excrete typically. But one of the things, Jim, that I do want to mention is and I would encourage a lot of our fellow physicians, researchers, but especially kind of our athletes to understand there is a significant difference between studying supplements, vitamins that were studied in disease states where you have deficiencies versus studying the same supplement in what you would call performance basically studies where people have an adequate amount. You're just looking at what can be done to increase the performance of certain tissue or a certain bodily function. So those, a deficiency versus a performance enhancement are dramatically different types of studies, and they're not even really biologically the same thing. Would you agree?
I would, yeah, absolutely. And it's tricky when you get into nutrients that are outside of the realm of vitamins. These vital amino acids. You look at nutrients that more is not always better, but then you think, well, what is the body expecting? What should we be getting? And so in studies with that I performed with the Air Force and others, high performance individuals, athletes and the like, these effects would show up that were significant. Speed of visual cognitive processing were enhanced, enhanced contrast sensitivity, a lot of really important effects that, as you might imagine, would affect performance. In wherever you might be performing, whether it's in a military jet or on the playing field, wherever. And so this increase in was noticeable in the individuals, and they said, well, this is like magic. Wow. And that's a neat reaction to hear from a patient or a subject in a study. But it's not magic. We're just bringing people up to where they should be. And really that idea of adequacy, I think, is important because we want to give the body what it can handle, what it's expecting, and then let it do its thing. So, for instance, when we're talking about carotenoids, which I've intimately studied over the past 25 years, you give the blood, the serum saturates at a certain level, so you're bringing in, let's say, 25 milligrams of these compounds, lutein, for instance. You measure it in the blood. It saturates at about 2 or 3 weeks, and it flatlines out. Now, that's fine. That's what the blood can handle. From there, it gets distributed to different tissues. It goes into the retina, specifically, right there in the center, of the fovea of the retina. It gets deposited into brain tissue. It gets deposited in the fatty tissues on the body, into the skin, where it provides protection to the skin. Pretty amazing. And so that level, if you keep that up, regular diet or supplementation, you're able to gradually accumulate more. So you see it level off in the blood. It goes up, 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 continues to rise in the eye, accumulates to really high levels. And to the point where, these special carotenoids that get deposited in the retina are it's the highest concentration of any nutrient brought into the human body in any tissue in the human body. I mean, that's wild. And, you have to kind of stand up and take notice of that. And so, these curves are different. So your intake, probably cap it at, 20 to 25 milligrams of these nutrients. And you can see that in blood, saturates at a certain level. And then you start to see it accumulate. You can measure it in different tissues, correlate that with, these performance enhancements. And of course, health over the long span.
Here's something that I don't think, I get a random question about this, but then I don't think a lot of people understand this. You have all these vitamins and minerals. People don't know where they get them. Where do you source them? And so I think that's always an interesting question. We saw a lot of sourcing debate when it came to the omega-3s. But for instance, when it comes to some of these other vitamins, even carotenoids, give us an example of kind of common places where they're sourced.
There are a couple of ways. For carotenoids, it's probably easiest and best, really, if you can get them naturally. You source them from plants, which is where they naturally come from, and where a lot of companies, including the one I work for, MacuHealth, we source them from marigolds. And, so marigolds, you think about them, these flowers, they thrive out in the sun. They are kind of a yellow-orange color, which is basically the color of the carotenoids, the lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin, these three that make it into the eye. And so what happens with the flower is that it's out in the sun, it grows best in the sun, and it synthesizes its own carotenoids to protect it, from the sun, balancing the benefit, and but it doesn't want to die out in the sun, so it's protecting itself by upregulating these carotenoids. You go in and you cultivate, harvest the marigold petals, and then basically, through several different processes, you're able to extract the carotenoids, purify them, and then of course down the line they make it into a supplement. So that's that's one way. You can, in some cases, synthesize. So this is obviously laboratory synthesis. This has been done for zeaxanthin. I know back in about 15 or 20 years ago, that process was, refined, able to do it. There are other plants you can get them from, but really bottom line, it's these carotenoids are most readily obtained from these marigold flowers.
So, Jim, this is great, and I think that. It's fascinating, and we're throwing out some terms that I think when I first learned about this, I said, oh yeah, and then I went and I quickly Googled, because I didn't want to go, what is a carotenoid? I think sometimes, we've discussed minerals, vitamins, micronutrients, things like that. So do you mind taking, and I know we're kind of going back a little bit, but do you mind taking a moment just to define what is a carotenoid? I mean, you said we find it in, colored vegetables and other things that are out there, but I think, and you've said where it is, it's in the eyes and also skin and other areas. But I think even just getting back to how many carotenoids are there? What is a carotenoid? And what are the most valuable ones when it comes to vision and performance?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Fraser. No problem at all. So carotenoids, people may have heard the term. Certainly most people have heard the term antioxidant. And these are, where we talk about oxidative stress or free radicals. These are oxygen species that can kind of, spin out of control. They're unbalanced. And so what an antioxidant molecule can do is stabilize the free radical oxygen and make it balanced. And it does that by, without going into too much detail, it usually donates an electron to it and stabilizes it. So, again, without getting crazy with the chemistry, but pretty simple. Carotenoids are really good at this, and particularly there are a class of carotenoids. They're called xanthophylл carotenoids, like lutein you may have heard of, zeaxanthin. And they are very long molecules, and they have, just this special structure. It's what's called alternating single and double bonds, and it's electron rich. And so they can quench the free radicals very, very effectively. Beta carotene, most folks have heard of beta carotene. That's a carotenoid. This class of carotenoids I was referring to earlier, of which lutein is one, is xanthophylls. But anyway, nevertheless, a carotenoid. So they're exceptional antioxidants, and again, plant-based. So you get them from colored fruits and vegetables, dark leafy greens, those kinds of things. The kinds of foods that you're supposed to be eating and maybe don't eat enough of.
True. Very true.
Now, keep in mind, for our European colleagues, beta carotene probably not a good idea with all the smoking going on over there, but we'll get into that in another time.
True.
Now, one of the things that's really interesting, okay, so let's say we did some retrospective food studies. We knew that, all right, this is good and that is good. And then we found plants that had it. We refine it from the plants. Here's my big issue, is nature has a way of making sure that the vitamin's gonna be able to get into our body by the freshness or the edibility of the fruit. If it's edible, you're gonna absorb the nutrients. If the fruit starts to rot, the nutrients are not biologically available, right? So things have a shelf life. Food has a shelf life. And I often see in the nutraceutical world, things are seen as these kind of, it's all the same, it's good for years, just take it. But there's no way that could be the case if your body is so sensitive to whatever it eats that is naturally sourced. So I guess the question that I have is, do these nutrients, do they have a shelf life, even if they are processed in a special way? And then number two, how do we even know that it's getting to the tissue that it's supposed to? Just because vitamin C is in a plant and there's a special way the plant gets it into our body, can you put it in a pill and be assured that it's going to get there too?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm really glad you asked, Eric. It's, the short answer is science. You have to study this stuff. You have to measure, whether or not it made it into, the blood, the eyes, whatever tissue that you're able to access. And it is in some ways like food, where, bioavailability, this term that I think most people are familiar with, the fraction of a substance that you eat that makes it into the body, into the blood, that is wildly variable with regard to, the formulation of a supplement, how it's, the form it's in, the controls that were in place during the formulation. There is a shelf life. I know, working in industry now, that you have to put a shelf life. You have to put an expiration date on there. And again, depending on the way a supplement is manufactured, can greatly impact its shelf life, its effective life. And so for instance, with these carotenoids, they are great antioxidants, but when they interact with oxygen, air, they degrade really fast. So they're quenching all the free radicals and they're going away. So if you've got a pill, like a pressed together capsule, and you've got a powdered formulation of carotenoids, that little bitty gap that can let just a small amount of air in can result in the complete degradation of the carotenoid within just a couple of weeks. And so you may start in the beginning, and I would argue that you're really only starting at about 50% of the label claim. And within a couple of weeks, it's zero, nothing afterwards. And so that kind of goes for, any formulation of these really sensitive materials, carotenoids in this case, that are exposed to air. There are, formulation, you find carotenoids in gummies, and that can be an issue as well. It seems so attractive, put these carotenoids in gummies, easier to eat, swallow, kids will eat them. And I love the motivation there, that's great. But you've got to pack them into kind of a cellulose matrix, and it's really strongly fibrous. so it doesn't necessarily get absorbed. It passes through, the gut, and so less is really absorbed through into the bloodstream.
Well,
And
I
then
think
also-
one of the themes you're going to see, and Fraser, I don't know where you stand on this, but gummies drive me nuts. And I'd love to hear scientists talk about them, because here's the thing: our athletes love gummies. Everywhere we go, with every team we have, love gummies. And the problem is, you'll walk into any locker room and there's a big jar of them that have been sitting there for months, wide open. Everyone just shoves their hands in, shoves a couple in their mouth, and from a science standpoint, as a scientist, it's just sugar eventually. And and to be honest with you, in the beginning, it was probably just sugar only. And so the gummy argument with me has always been a difficult one, because I'll have trainers or sports scientists to say, well, they're not going to take anything else, they'll only take the gummies. And my contention there is, well, again, if they were 4 years old, I would entertain the argument. But these guys are elite athletes, and we're doing them a disservice by just saying, just let them have the gummies. I'm sure there's ways to vacuum pack them, or to do stuff that's just not cost effective. So that's one thing. And the second thing you'd mentioned a little bit, the wild variability in what you actually get. So is there a way, is there independent groups that can verify claims? And is that standardized in the industry, or is that elective?
It's totally elective, in fact, and it's alarming when you consider that the nutraceutical, supplement industry is not regulated by the FDA. In fact, it's really not regulated by anything. You're expected to self-police. And of course, as you might imagine, in a free market economy, you're looking to maybe take shortcuts and just make as much money as you can. It may involve, making kind of outrageous claims. In the end, you can put something on a label, and it might not be in there at all, or there might be additional nutrients that it's not checked, and so it's scary, frankly. So what good industry practice involves third-party testing. So you send you may do internal testing, but then you send it out. Get it verified, validated, spot tested. NSF will do this for you. Inform Sport can do this. These are entities that we use. We also send for specific carotenoid measurements out to an independent lab to get that done. And it's, you test for, label claim, what's on the label, what's not on the label. You make sure you're clear. And then, obviously you've got science backing up all of the absorption and effects, and when you're talking about shelf life too, you're looking at stability and what we want in terms of the 3-year expiration date. You're good. You don't have to worry about the gummy situation where it's just out exposed to oxygen. These nutrients are in the right matrix. They're suspended in oil in a light, tight capsule, because light will also degrade these nutrients in a major way. So it's a little laughable that you'd have these gummies just in a bin for somebody to reach in. It's transparent, exposed to light. Makes me cringe a little, because I know it's all going away in a matter of a week or two. But you really, very few companies do this, but to sort of self police, to send out for this independent third party.
Well, and from mine and Fraser's standpoint, I'll tell you, this is a little alarming, because when we started getting into the basic science of this and looking at the idea of third party assessment, NSF, and these things, which in the sports world we deal with a lot. Even the major players in pharmaceutical companies, even the major players in healthcare, even the major vitamins that are often most trusted, don't do any of this. And so you just said it is a rarity. It's not the norm. And that's one of the things that, we do think a little bit of awareness needs to be brought, because, like I said, it's easy to claim. It's much different to verify and validate. So, that's one thing. And Fraser, you got to agree with me. How many times do we deal with programs, sports scientists, or collegiate programs or professional programs, and they're asking for validation of stuff that you would just assume was industry regulated?
Oh, all the time. And I think there's so many things we've already brought up. It's and that's why there's things, independent assessment, as well as, you know, NSF sport, and those just make sure they're certified is so critical within the sport world, because I think they also get told all sorts of things all the time. So if you can have some sort of industry standard that they know isn't going to harm an athlete, then that's one of the first questions. When I've brought up nutritional supplements, that's the first question, like, are they NSF sport, or, you know, or anything like that? And yes, they are. Okay, good. Now we can actually talk about it. The other thing that I find interesting, and Jim, you could probably talk to this a little bit more, is that you brought up FDA, but I understand that there are other countries that their government actually does check the claims within some of these nutritional supplements. So that way they're at least assessing it may not be as rigorous as maybe what we'd want, but at least they're doing something to make sure that people aren't just putting refined sawdust, essentially, or filler. I mean, that's really what you're telling us is, you know,
Sure.
if it's out long enough, you're just going to get filler, and then we got placebo effect more than we have actual impact.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Fraser. The European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, they do validate some claims. They look at scientific backing, justification for it, which I think is a good first step for sure. And I do wish that we would, you know, step up here with the FDA, or create maybe the government's big enough, but, you know, if we have, you know, some sort of organization with purview over nutraceuticals, I think that would be really smart, because, I mean, as you know, I mean, you just have to look at, I don't know, TikTok or Instagram. I mean, there's tons of, you know, acceptance now of nutritional supplements and fads that come along, and people popping pills, you know, supplements to, you know, improve whatever. And it's scary, because, you know, it might just be, you know, it might be just sunflower oil or sugar, or it might be something harmful, you know, so it can be dangerous. I think that, you know, the third-party testing, you know, being now outside of academia in industry, you know, you see it costs more. It's expensive to do. We test every batch that goes out. If there's something wrong with it, we fix it. I mean, thankfully, we've got really good controls along the way. It very rarely happens, but nevertheless, you know, the testing part, you know, it costs some money. It's more expensive. It's the right thing to do. But, you know, again, probably 1 or 2% of companies do this. Right. And the fundamental basic third-party testing really just primarily screens for toxins, which is a good thing. They don't really get at the exact numbers that you've got for the active ingredients in many cases. You know, like from our standpoint, maybe it's omega-3s or carotenoids like lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin. So, you know, it's a first step, but really to nail it into the wall, you know, I think we need to get a little bit more specific testing, require companies to do that kind of thing.
Now, one of the things I want to end up with for today, because we covered a lot, and I love the idea of basically making things way more complex than people thought, because it makes people rethink conceptually, you know, what they're doing and why they're doing it. It also makes you understand why nature prioritizes certain things and does certain things. But there's this area of nutritional dynamics that's driving me crazy right now. And we've always known, in our case, Fraser, let's say, if you give someone doxycycline, you know, you don't want to take it with a vitamin, you don't want to take it with certain vitamins that could chelate, or they could bind to the doxycycline so it's not active. So you don't want to take that with a multivitamin kind of idea. And these are mine and Fraser's world, with the medical world. But one of the things that's been really interesting in the American College of Sports Medicine and a lot of nutritional studies in the recent years is talking about how does one vitamin affect the ability for another one to perform, especially if they're taken at the same time. And then we also have the concept of different vitamins absorb different in different people. There's genetic variation. There's age differences. As you deposit more fat, you change the way you metabolize and what you can deposit. There's ethnicity differences as well, basically food, and there's race differences based on genetics. I'll tell you something that drove me nuts. So there was a study that was recent that was done and published on bananas in smoothies. Now, this has been debated for a long time, but then what they were able to do is they were able to show that if you blended a banana in a smoothie that had chocolate or berries, the antioxidant properties of the chocolate or the berries were negated by basically a protein within the banana. And so they don't want athletes having bananas in their smoothie because it could bind other products, even though the banana by itself is fine and the fiber is great, especially if you eat it later at a separate time. So we're starting to actually get to the point with athletes that they're not allowed to eat certain foods with other certain foods because I think the science is getting to a point where we can see how this is kind of happening. Now, it's really high level stuff, and it's stuff that, we'd still rather have people eating healthy, even if they were eating it all at the same time. Does this play into you guys when you're developing products? Because let's say you say, well, I want these 3 antioxidants, but if I put these 2 in, they may compete with each other. Does that make sense?
Yes, actually, it does make a lot of sense. The banana thing, it worries me a little bit because I say, if it's healthy food in general, keep it coming. That's fine. And then in the case of the athlete, of course, what do athletes want? They want energy and they want muscle. And where do you get that? You get that from carbs, fats, protein. And so that's been the focus largely, and to sort of bend their minds to micronutrients. That's where the magic is. I'm telling you, it's where you can really speed up visual processing and reaction time and all of these great performance effects. It's an interesting thing, but yeah, the competition there. There's a characterized effect of competition among carotenoids for absorption. So, for instance, if you take, say, you've eaten food with a lot of lutein, and also has a lot of lycopene, which is the carotenoid in tomatoes, the red colored pigment, and maybe also you throw in some beta carotene. What happens? So if you eat them alone, as part of a meal, let's say you control for everything else, the time it sets in the gut and all of this, and the amount of fat that you have with the meal, which by the way is important. You want to have, these nutrients found in vegetables with a little bit of fat, probably at least about 3 to 5 grams of fat, not a ton. You don't need to eat a stick of butter with your salad, but just a little bit. And so if you have them individually, let's just put that number at 100%. Absorption of individual beta carotene, lutein, lycopene. If you mix 2 together, you're going to knock it down probably by about 10% with each, and then all 3 you get this, maybe 15%. It's not a major effect, but when you look at like a natural human diet, if you are going to be eating, a variety of fruits and vegetables, let's say, you're going to get a lot of different carotenoids, a lot of different nutrients. And so, I think the natural situation is that you're putting them in together. As long as you've got a little bit of fat, you've got, keep them in the stomach for a little while. Maybe you have them with a meal. You're going to get, really good absorption. And so in the supplement situation, there are other enhancers, the formulation, the fact that it's in a little bit of oil. There are ways of formulating that already kind of give the body a shortcut for absorption. We're looking at about, 80-85% of the value of 100% from food if you do that. So with our specific formulation, there's variability, of course, among other supplements, but so yeah, hopefully that makes sense. You're not losing a ton due to competition among carotenoids. There's a little bit of loss, but I don't think anything that is really to be concerned about, as long as you're regularly getting these nutrients in. That's the key.
This is great, because I think you talk about competition. We get concerned about that for various reasons. There's medicines that if you eat grapefruit, there's
oh yeah.
So and you kind of touched on it, that there are also formulations that enhance and also enhance absorption. So how did you increase absorption? What did you do, right?
Yeah, so it was, probably, 25, 30 years ago, where it was really understood that, if you have a little bit of lipid, these are lipid soluble nutrients. And so they go into fat, and they get packaged in these, little, they're called micelles, and they pass through the intestinal wall, and that's facilitated by a little bit of fat. So you want a little bit of fat. So with regard to supplements, you suspend them in a little bit of oil. It might be sunflower oil or something like that. Just takes a little bit. That serves a couple of purposes. Stabilizes the carotenoids, so they're not going to oxidize. You're going to maintain. I mean, we have samples from 10 or 12 years ago that we'll test, and they're meeting label claims still. All right, they're super stable. So you've got that. Plus, after the stomach breaks things down, gets the the sort of the shell casing taken care of, you've got this lipid matrix, and so that facilitates absorption. You can go one step further. You can create some micelles for the body, and so we've done that, and so you put basically these you attach. In short, you attach these little arms to the end of the carotenoid molecules, and it keeps them from crystallizing. It keeps them soluble. It keeps them in sort of, for lack of a better term, kind of like a liquid state, which again promotes absorption, and you get enhanced bioavailability that way. So there are ways to do this, and it's pretty exciting, that you can help the body, to absorb these nutrients, and it's neat to be, kind of on the cutting edge of that, and to demonstrate this with science, and show it go up in the eye, in the skin, wherever these.
And that's one thing that I want to back up a second, because I think what we're taking for granted, and you're a research scientist, me and Fraser are physicians. This is stuff that we've known for a long time. Is that unfortunately, your body is really, really efficient at absorbing fat and through the hepatic portal system. So basically, the trick that we have with medicine that we use, with supplements and vitamins and carotenoids that you guys research, is that because the body is so great at absorbing fat, we piggyback on this system because we can get it out of the gut into the body. And the second thing really is that your body's also incredibly efficient at transporting fat-based molecules throughout its system. So once it gets into your bloodstream, fat is, just like you said, it's incredibly stable. It is easily transported. And not only can you get it into the bloodstream easily, we're really efficient at getting it out of the bloodstream. Look at any dude, look at the gut area. That's where the dudes are going to deposit it. And so you'll notice how efficient your body is with how quickly that can grow if you're not under control. So the concept of fat is a really important one. And again, a lot of fats are good fats, but I love that you kind of got back to the idea of, all right, well, let's play with what we know. Let's play with how the body works. And that's what we're going to do to increase absorption. Like I said, it also is tough for all of us that are aging, because you just get better and better and better at absorbing and distributing fat as we age. And whereas in a younger body, metabolism wise, you don't. And that can play into some of the medical stuff that we do too, because young people can often be more difficult to use fat soluble things because they have a lot less, whereas older people have a lot more. And they also have a lot more dynamics. They'll have a harder time breaking down enzymes because as our body ages, we don't work as good as we used to. So I thought that was a great thing. Fraser, I think we covered a lot today. I do want to arm wrestle Jim into another session here, at least talking about functionality. And then I really want to dive into the specifics of some of the unique molecules here. Anything else you want to touch on before we kind of wrap up here?
Well, I mean, you mentioned just this aging effect, and I think it's an important aspect of this because for a while it was characterized that the carotenoids, you would supplement with these nutrients, and they're good certainly for vision, they're good for cognition, they're good for cardiovascular system, they're good really throughout the body, and as a function of age, we saw that there seemed to be lower absorption with age. And certainly for some nutrients, that is absolutely the case. The bioavailability kind of drops a little bit. The system becomes a little less efficient as you maybe get into your 50s, 60s, 70s. But it's interesting with carotenoids, what's going on most likely, and we see this even in diabetic patients where you're absorbing the carotenoids, you're actually getting them, but they're getting used systemically. They're getting used up, and so they're doing their job. They're doing a great thing, and they're great antioxidants. They also serve anti-inflammatory functions, and so if you have systemic inflammation, even if it's low grade, like with age, typically, you've got some aches and pains, arthritis, etc. the nutrients get used dealing with that, and that's a good thing, but there's less available to make it to, for instance, the eye. And so, and even as early as 2004, we knew that in diabetics, all things being equal, same diet, everything, they had about half of the deposition of the carotenoids in the eye as a non-diabetic. So, there's just not as much available to make it into the eye. So it's partly, we have to understand, the needs of the body with age or with, a specific condition. And then if we understand that, then we can, act accordingly and potentially give them maybe a little bit more to help out. And so I'm interested in those kinds of studies going forward too.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think there's so much more we can talk about. I'm excited to get into some of the function and also breaking down getting into the weeds, if you will, or the marigolds, if you will. But I think that, I really appreciate, Jim, your insights in looking at, bioavailability, the reasons why we need nutritional supplements, looking at we need to get to the levels where we once probably could from food, but now we don't as well. And also really the commitment to quality that you guys all have, because, I don't want to put filler in my body if it's not going to do anything. Why spend the money? Why spend the time? And also why take the risk versus, making sure that we're recommending for ourselves, but also others, the highest quality that's out there. So that way we get potentially the maximum output from it too. So I think this has been really helpful in hearing a lot of your insights on the reasons why just nutritional supplementation is so important.
Now, one thing that we use some key terms here, and I do want to highlight them because they're terms that we gloss over because we understand. But I think one of the important things to understand is, as researchers, as clinicians, as physicians, we clearly see the efficiency that the body has with natural food. So in a perfect world, I completely think that if you had a robust diet that was highly variable and you exercised a significant amount every day and you didn't sit on a computer all the time, and I think diet truly would be all you ever need in the majority of cases, given, certain diseases and aging effects and stuff like that we certainly want to fight now. But we're in a rich country, and we know what the rich countries are. They're the countries that can afford to do the science and the research and things like this. And it's interesting in the United States that we're so eager to jump on the TikTok, the Facebook fad and spend our money for a quick fix, that it's a lot of what we have to even battle within our colleagues and physicians, and this idea that, wild, outrageous claims, although they may seem wild and outrageous, if there's a 1% chance they could work and it's too good to be true, why not just give it a shot? And that's a lot of mentality that we have. And let's be honest, even in very rich countries, with how busy we are and how much work we do, we're really not going to get a lot of the nutrients that we truly need, and especially if you have a very active lifestyle. And conversely, a more sedentary lifestyle is probably even more dangerous, to be honest. And so the aging effects are going to be interesting. And when we really get into breaking down performance and increasing performance, I think this is where we truly rely on what we'd call these, first world countries, these countries that have the ability to do this research to show us a lot of the ways that we can enhance what we're doing, but in a very pragmatic, in a very logical, evidence-based way. We're all subject to, oh wow, that looks great. Maybe I'll try it just in case it could work. Fraser's still hammering that thigh master for several hours a day, and dude, you look great.
And it shows. Yeah,
that's exactly it. I didn't like the shake weight phase. It was really bad on social media. So thank God you giving that up. But it's the concepts, right? It's this idea of where can we navigate this whole idea of supplementing what we know. And Mother Nature is absolutely awesome, and everything we're getting from the concept of where the human body evolved. We have not found a way to circumvent the natural evolution process yet. That's taken millions of years, but we can sure enhance it and we can help it. And I think that's kind of where we're at. So this has been absolutely awesome. Everything that we hope to do, we're gonna, cite it. We're gonna bring you guys some references down the road and things like that. But ultimately, thank you so much, Jim, for joining us, and Fraser for helping walk us through this.
Yeah, you bet, Derek. No problem. It's great.
Yeah,
All right, so look forward to more episodes, and we're also going to have short segments available through our social media platforms. So take care, everyone.